was raised by two geniuses. My father was an astrophysicist, but he was also a Peter Pan and drank like a fish. I'd say he was an alcoholic. And my mother was equally as brilliant, but she spent her time supporting him, getting his master's and then his PhD. And her chance at schooling, higher level schooling, never came. And she self-soothed my father's behaviors with food. So that was her confidant and that was her solace. And back at that time, they would treat compulsive overeating or, overeating with diet pills that were straight speed. So there were two addicts at the helm, and it was hurt and abused children raising hurt and abused children. Because what I really clearly understood in adulthood was they came from horrifically abusive households and recreated their household of choice, which was explosively abused. I mean, abuse of every type, slathered in every crevice. I was the middle of 5 children, and my experience is very different than my other siblings, which is often the case when you come from a chaotic home, as I did. I knew very early on this was an unsafe place. I think my first memory was 18 months in a playpen too long, crying. And once I was acknowledged, it wasn't with love. And my father was always the champion and the fun one, throwing us up and giving us whisker hugs and, chasing us around the room. I mean, he was a big kid. And my mother was the one that had to hold us together and also stand up to his horrendous behavior. He was very dismissive of her and really was good at serving self. That's what he was used to. So that also took a bit to uncover, because I always saw my mother as the mean and nasty and just totally out of, sync with self. She would be so kind and loving, and the next moment I would be beaten almost to the point of passing out and didn't know what I had done to cause this abuse. So it was a very unsafe home. I knew I needed to just hang in, do what I could do to survive, and that I would leave. And I always had a vision that I would go to New York City and I would be like Barbara Walters, who was did a lot for females. She was one of the first hardcore journalists on all the big magazine shows on TV. She created The View, and she also did these huge celebrity interviews before the Academy Awards when that was chic. So at 17, I left that home. I graduated on a Friday night, and Saturday morning the car was packed and I was gone. And that pretty much was the end of that for me. I landed in New York City at 19 doing an internship from college in arts management, and then went back to New York City at 21 after I graduated to work at a very large global talent agency, which was really glitzy. And I was, working amongst celebrities that were household names and musicians and filmmakers, but it wasn't enough to cover my rent. So I started training people in exercise as a private exercise trainer. Before that was chic. And Barbara Walters became my client.
That's so amazing. So tell me, growing up, which is exactly when we learn what the world is like, are we loved, are we okay, are we not okay as we are? What did you think of yourself? What were your thoughts about who Susan is and what she deserves growing up in this household?
It was a very confusing message pad. I was either elevated and, no one could touch me because I was so wonderful and gifted, or I was the piece of dirt on the carpet that you could kick. I had suicidal ideation very young. I think 6 years old, I took out the carving knives from a block that were in a cupboard in the kitchen, and I took out a knife and I just thought, I could just lance this through my heart now. All this would be over. And I heard my mother coming in the hallway. So I slammed that knife in the block and closed the cupboard doors. I was always trying to please. I had no semblance of who I was. I just knew in order to survive, you had to placate. And I had a huge gift of telepathy. Like I could tell what someone was thinking inside their mind. It would come in full sentences. And oftentimes I would blurt that out, which wasn't very appreciated by the adults. So I learned how to put that gift away. And my ability as an empath to feel the tenor, the texture, the tone, the emotional state of those in the room with me was actually life-saving. And I just had this huge drive within that I was going to excel, that I was going to escape, and that all this horror and confusion, and there was a lot of violence and abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, just every type of abuse imaginable. I was going to get out and I was going to make it. And that was the strongest messaging I had internally. It wasn't coming externally. Externally it was completely mixed up. But internally, I had that sense of strength and I had that light inside my heart that I was really connected to. I realized early on in my career that, and in my life, my personal life, I was repeating the same behaviors that I had seen demonstrated in my home. My parents fought brutally and often with dangerous weapons. And I would be the one to break up those fights and bring soothing and kindness. So I was creating abusive relationships and drama, big fights, and not getting where I wanted to go at work. Even though I was very talented and could think out of the box, my world got smaller and smaller because I too was using alcohol. I too was using food. I too was using exercise like a drug, like heroin. And I didn't have the tools to know who I really was. I was using that same tool of becoming a chameleon and anticipating what the person wanted from me and not really going within and deciding, do I want to be in this circumstance? Do I feel good in this relationship? Is this really an appropriate boundary that my boss is crossing right now with me? This is hard to discern. And I became so run down and so disassociated with myself. It was almost like Susan was in that body living, but the real Susan was out here, outside myself. So there was a dissociation going on. And I realized I was in trouble. I was gonna implode if I didn't get help. And that was very insightful at the time. And I got passed a card of a therapist who a friend had seen. And I thought, well, you don't go to therapists and pay them money to talk about your personal, memories. Why would I do that? Thank God I did. I remember I was in a bus going up the Upper East Side to this appointment, and I was absolutely breathless. It felt like the whole bus was going to close in on me. The anxiety was so deep. The throat was so tight. And I was shaking, and I had to wear sunglasses and a Walkman with headphones everywhere I went, or I couldn't go. And so somehow I made it to this therapist's office, and he had me come in. He closed the door. I was terrified. I was like, men and a closed door. What's going to happen to me now? But immediately he started talking about, was there alcoholism in my family? Because I told him my life is completely out of control and totally unmanageable. That's all I told him before I walked into that room. And I couldn't figure out why he was talking about alcoholism. My dad was my drinking partner, and I had fun when I drank. And, I couldn't even imagine not having drink. And he said, well, for now, I'm going to suggest that you don't drink while you're in treatment with me and you go to AA. And I said, whatever would I go to AA for? And he said, to learn about your father's drinking problem, which was really smart. And then he said, you also might want to go to adult children of alcoholics meetings to learn what you survived in that kind of toxic system of addiction. And so I was obedient back then. I mean, I was also in a lot of agony. And if you told me to go stand on my head in Central Park, I would have done it because I was so beaten down. And I agreed. So I did go to those meetings, and I did learn about addiction and how it plays out in a family system and how that can affect you. And then I also, 3 months into it, realized, wow, I'm an alcoholic too. I never knew that. And I put down the drink. I haven't had a drink since before you were born. And that's sort of the basic level playing field that I need in order to complete the mission, to do the work that I believe I've been sent here to do. And luckily, I didn't have to die to realize this. I'm a Scorpio, and here's some more hooey, but Scorpios, they're phoenixes. They dive into the ash and then they revive themselves, and then they dive back into the ash and they revive themselves. And I think next time I come in, I'll go to Capricorn or something a little less traumatizing, but that's what I found myself doing. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in a path of soul evolution, and I had one challenge after the other. Completely healed. I was still seeking approval from the outside in, especially from men, especially from bosses, especially from any kind of opportunity. It was all about what they thought of me and how I was going to help them. But what happened was I got deep into meditation in LA back in the 90s. That was a thing. Now it's all over. But then you were kind of looked at like, she's a meditator. Wow, what's going on with her? But I went on long-term retreats where for 10 days we didn't speak, we didn't make eye contact. And that helped me get really clear in the moment with what was happening in the moment. And that's where I gained more clarity, although I was still using this somehow as an abusive tool that I couldn't measure up to. And I became an endurance athlete and got all my accolades from, marathons and triathlons, including escape from Alcatraz, jumping off a barge in the cold, Alcatraz basin there and swimming back, looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, swimming back, all these things that I was doing, they supported me through my process. But what it was hiding was I was still living from the outside in and not really knowing how to go from my inside out. And I was in a marriage. I was in a relationship first, but a marriage with an alleged narcissist. So I really couldn't understand that. So here I had like everything on the outside. My friends are like, we don't understand you. You're so capable. You're competent. Now you own your own house. You bought your own house for your family. Like, why can't you speak up to this husband of yours to like lend a hand? When are you going to be able to like ask for help? And I couldn't. I was so shut down. And the third layer, I'd say, that peeled off, that really woke me up to the importance of this living from the inside. And this was my near-death experience. To understand who this gentleman really was that I was married to, it was sort of easy to cover it before we had a son. But once we had the child, and I was carrying the bag for most of the mortgage and the property taxes and the insurance and the repairs, and it was so much that I had no choice but to see. I was going to try to make this man fiscally responsible, come to the plate. And I decided we were going to negotiate a post-nuptial agreement to even things out financially. Ooh, don't do that with someone who's an alleged narcissist, because they will use it as a tool. So we got to the last point of this agreement, Sabrina, and I thought, my marriage is going to be saved, hooray. And he folded his arms and his eyes went into those lizard-like slits. And he said, I'm hiring an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. And at that moment, I heard that intuitive voice come over my shoulder, in through my heart, saying, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. And there was no way I knew that I was going back. I was going forward, and I was going to trudge through this life experience with all the gusto I had, and I was going to make it. And that was my perfect storm, because we went back to our shared home at the time, and I assumed, well, he's obviously going to leave. He's suing me for divorce. He would not leave the master bedroom. So I took a mattress across the home that I had bought and paid for our family into a partial conversion in the garage. Bare mattress on a bare floor in a partial conversion in a garage. And that was the billboard I needed to fall on my head, to wake up to it all. to really see how I did not value myself, to see how I gave myself away repeatedly, even though I had these profound cycles of awakening throughout my life. I still hadn't gotten the message. And this was the billboard that I needed to fall on my head. And I literally dove into the ash. And I used that little partial conversion in the garage as my monastery. And I went deep into my own body, working more somatically for the first time, rather than talk therapy, which is great. It gave me the storyline, but it didn't really shift me. It didn't really shift those neural pathways in my brain. It didn't really change me. I was square back to where I was 25 years before I started acting out the same behaviors. And going through this experience, which was horrendous, because my husband was an alleged narcissist, the suggestion is no contact. But here we were living in the same home with, God bless, our dear little son there in the same, I can't even say it's a home. It was a nightmare, but I needed that nightmare. I needed to see it repeatedly to remind myself how clearly insane of a position I was in. And I held no contact. I didn't speak verbally. I didn't hold eye contact. So all those meditation retreats were for naught. They were with very specific purpose. And I used that tenacity that I had as an endurance athlete. And I moved through this experience, reassuring myself over and over when I felt the victimization. I felt the injustice. Like, how dare is this fat fluff in the master bedroom? And here I am on the floor in the garage with the rats and the spiders and whatever else is passing through. Like, how is this possible? It's possible because I needed his teaching. I consider him my greatest guru. I needed that teaching to really understand my value in here. And that's where it all comes from. And to really honor and respect those gifts that I had come in with, that empathy, that intuition. Even some of my telepathic abilities started coming back. And every time I would want to rage and like rip him apart, I would just feel the anger, express it outside myself, walking with my dog or going to the beach or whatever it was, but never, not once, taking it up with him, not falling into that trap, and just knowing that I would get through it. And it seemed forever, but it was one calendar year, and I was able to write him a 6-figure check, and off he went to his next victim. And I think that was the most perfect of storms for my old sort of identity, my old reality to really die, and for the honest truth to walk in. And again, it's probably way too much Southern California soul hooey, but I really had to believe that I came in to this world with a very specific path and very specific experiences that I wanted to embrace, and that my family was one of them, that they played their roles perfectly. I actually have a relationship with my family. I have profound love for who they are and even the roles that they've all played, as I do my ex-husband. I don't engage with him. I still hold no contact with him, but I have a lot of forgiveness. And now I have that full platform that I was searching for all those decades. I have it. It's like a miracle. And miracles keep happening because I'm living in a new zip code. I mean, I'm living in a new zip code physically because I left Los Angeles, but that's another story. And I live in rural Montana now. So that's a physical change. But the way that I treat myself, the way that I live my life is 360 degrees changed from where I was.
So was there ever a choice in your mind of, am I just going to feel sorry for myself and potentially not accomplish anything else because I'll just be in this victim mode? Or was it just, I've got to make it through it, whatever the cost?
So I always had that drive, even as a youngster with what I was facing, that was always in me. I almost lost it towards the end of my drinking alcoholically. That light was getting dimmer and dimmer inside me, but somehow I resurrected it. And you mentioned that maybe the easier, softer way is sort of staying the status quo, sort of accepting what is and figuring out a way to manage with that. But intuitively, I must have come in with messaging that that was not the route for me. And by the time of the perfect storm with my marriage ending, I had had experience of walking away from abusive, toxic systems, you know, the toxicity in my family and the ancestral line that bleeds back. And then the toxicity of addiction and walking away from that and letting that go. And then to understand my clinical depression and choosing not to go the medicated route for the entirety of my experience. And then ultimately, like, to face this marriage, that was the roughest thing, because my abandonment button is so sensitive. Like, that's very hard to move through, but I always had the faith and the inner understanding that's what I was here for. And ultimately, that last lesson, that tattooed that understanding inside me. So now I'm at a place where I understand clearly that when something comes up that's distasteful, that brings up incredible fear with me, or rejection or anger, okay, I need to feel all that stuff. That's legitimate. But I can't sit there, because I have too much experience walking through this stuff, knowing that I've always gotten to a better place. Everything has always moved me to live a much more authentic life. And now I believe that this is my purpose. This is my value. This is my gift to others that are experiencing the same and are lost in the confusion and the drama and the fear and the anger and feeling they're a victim of that. No, you're not. And there's so much more to come. I mean, people are surprised that I do have a smile on my face and that I'm content and that I'm living a pretty good life, Sabrina, like beyond my wildest dreams, actually. And this is how I got there. Yeah. And I really think that we're meant to be here. I think after writing the book that I did, it's called Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. After doing about 150 podcasts to support that book and really talking about it, like, I've come to understand that we are surrounded in systems that are not really supporting our humanity, our homo luminous traits. I mean, we are some of the most compassionate beings out there, and our hearts are coveted. And obviously, our DNA is coveted based on what we've seen play out over the last 5 years. I mean, how can you not recognize that? So waking up to these systems and unraveling them and seeing how they played out for you, and then, getting to the point of, no, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to try a different way, and then seeing the results of that, it sort of led me to be less afraid of this chaos and this transformation and the systems that I trusted falling apart, and seeing that, play out before me. It's really brought me to a place of, oh yeah, this is right, because we're in a place that's kind of nasty. Earth is a pretty rough neighborhood, And maybe there's another way of being that we can be as a compassionate, loving community that's going to lead to such abundance. And we're fighting it tooth, line, and sinker, because we've been so trained into this way of being, and it goes this way, and you do college this way. And, I remember being in that church pew as a little kid, just glaring, sneering at the priest. I think I was 6 years old, because he was telling me I needed to go through him to talk to Source. And I was like, I don't need a broker to talk to Source. I talk to him every day out in my backyard. I talk to the angels too. Don't give me that stuff. Same thing in school. Like, don't tell me I need a degree to do something. I went to school. I have a major in fine art, dance, and I have a concentration in business. And I ended up as a television producer. Had nothing to do with that. And a lot of us do that. And I wasn't going to come out with a bunch of debt, or I wasn't going. And it's funny how that manifested, because I just knew this is ridiculous. They're teaching me the same stuff I learned in 7th grade again. Oh, and I have to take the same courses I did the last 3 years of high school and pay you for that? No. I think there is a new way of living. I think we all are starting to awaken to it if we aren't amidst the awakening and helping others awaken. And I think that we have a lot of natural gifts that, they've been smashed under the carpet hard and they're coming back to life. We're kind of getting rewired here, and we're helping each other, and we each have a role in doing it. We're just gifted that we got to the place where we could see it clearly and say yes to it and embrace it. So in each stage of my recovery, whether it be addiction or clinical depression or narcissistic abuse, I always had that light on that there was something better. And I would have fun, like having a reading, some kind of metaphysical reading, whatever it was, and take it or leave it. But even as a kid, I would go in the tree and just know there were other ways of being. And then once I could clearly understand my abilities as an empath and the feeling, I could send my energy back that didn't belong to me, and that made me feel better. So it's just by implementing simple things. Yeah, we have our stories, we have our baggage, and that's a piece of us, but it's not the all of us. And once you understand, that's not all of who I am. That's not my only story. And you pick up the phone, and your friend who you were thinking about yesterday is on the phone. How did they get on the phone? I was going to call you. And that becomes typical. You can summon something telepathically. I wanted a raise on a job I was doing, and I just started speaking telepathically to the guy that could give me, the go ahead on the raise. And I didn't say anything because I knew don't bring it up, but just my gosh, I got an email that I got the raise. Exactly what I wanted. Like, we're manifestors. If you go back into your life and we write it down, there's a lot of stuff, Sabrina, and there's a lot of stuff your listeners have manifested. If you start understanding the energy and the frequency and the vibration, even those, even the stuff on YouTube, whatever it is, all those frequencies, it will change you. It will change your mood. And if you can come and open your heart, even if it's for a few minutes each day, and get out of that, my world stinks and it's never going to get any better, you're going to see positive change. We've been trained out of doing that. The expectation bar has been set high. And once social media came in, it exploded. And you're only good as, and you're not able to express your opinion, and you're not able to train your inner knowing. You're trained out of that inner knowing. You're labeled, and to break out of that programming is where we're going. It's why we're feeling the way we're feeling. It's why people are walking away from jobs and systems they relied upon for years and trying it a new way. And we're going to see more of it. It might kind of be painful, but the world is going to shift big time, and we're going to be shifting right along with it. And that's why I'm so excited, because it's almost like, you're being let out of the cage. As I've experienced, on a microcosm, walking through the difficulties and the challenges and how I feel now. I feel like that is happening on the macrocosm. The veils are dropping. We're finally getting to see the Oz behind the curtain. And we're finally having to take back our sovereignty and our power. I gave it away. I gave it away. Whatever the government says, okay, for a long time. Until I started waking up to stuff that was like, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like I was sort of walking blind to it and just in acceptance. And then I was like, you want me to do what? What jab? What is in there? Really? Yeah, no, thank you. That's not for me. No, it was for my son. He definitely wanted that and believed in that. And I supported him in that because that's his path. That's what he chooses. So I believe this is all bringing us back to our own sovereignty. What do you think? How do you feel? Rather than walking zombie and just accepting, well, that is what it is. And I think that is going to lead to incredible freedom like we've never known. Yeah. SusanGold.us has almost everything. The book's also available on Amazon. I have free tools on my website, and I'm offering your viewers to have a grounding activation with me. It's just 20 minutes, and I help you get grounded so you can make wise decisions, so you can feel your inner authentic power. And then I'd have a YouTube channel where weekly I put out videos of inspiration and have some conversations with other people that have walked through their own adversity. And that's YouTube channel is at Susan Gold is Magical. But everything's on the website. So if you get lost, just go back to SusanGold.us.